Okay, let's dive into something pretty noticeable, maybe even unsettling, in how U.S. media handles certain kinds of violence.
Right. There's this focus on forgiveness, isn't there?
Exactly. But it seems really specific, like it pops up intensely when the victims are Black and the person who committed the violence is white.
It's a pattern, yeah. Almost a script. You think about really public tragedies, the Charleston church shooting, for instance, or police killings of Black men.
And what happens? Grieving families, sometimes within hours, are put on national TV.
And ask that question. You know, can you forgive him? Or some version of it.
The speed can be just jarring. I remember CNN interviewing survivors from Charleston.
The very next day.
Yes, the next day. Asking about forgiveness for the white supremacist shooter before victims were even buried. Right. It's hard to process.
It really is. And Sabrina Fulton, Trayvon Martin's mother, she put words to that pressure. She said something like, Black people aren't forced to forgive, but they are expected to forgive.
Expected. That's the key word. It feels like this immense weight.
Totally. So for this deep dive, we want to, unpack that. Where does this expectation come from historically? What does it do in society?
And what does it tell us about maybe deeper things going on in media and racial dynamics? We're drawing on news reports, some scholarly analysis here.
Yeah, exactly. And that history piece you mentioned is crucial. It's not entirely new.
No, it seems like there are echoes going way back. Even someone like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., right? He spoke powerfully about love and forgiveness, even in the face of horrific brutality during the Civil Rights Movement.
He did. And scholars like Alison Wiltz point out that while that message was vital for the movement, it might have also, perhaps unintentionally, conditioned activists to sort of absorb violence and offer forgiveness.
Even when the attackers showed zero remorse, as Wiltz put it, not a lick of remorse.
Yeah. And over time, that kind of teaching gets woven into the media narrative. Black victims are often framed as, I guess, ideally finding grace. It becomes this sort of duty to forgive.
And if they don't, or they say, not yet, or I can't, that almost becomes a story in itself.
Right. Professor Chad Williams at Brandeis warns about this. He says this expectation can actually make it harder to push for real change, for social justice. Because people might see Black forgiveness and think, okay, problem solved, or mistake it for, like, absolution for the bigger issues. So, okay, if Black forgiveness is often highlighted, even admired, but maybe also misunderstood, what are the consequences? What does that actually do?
Well, Matthew Gutterl at Brown University suggests it can show that mainstream white society isn't really equipped to grasp it as anything other than maybe weakness, or perhaps a way to achieve what he calls white racial salvation.
White racial salvation, meaning?
Like a public display that helps soothe white guilt or discomfort, but doesn't necessarily lead to justice or systemic change. It prioritizes feeling better over doing better, perhaps.
That leads to a really important question then. Why is this expectation seemingly placed almost only on Black victims?
The contrast is pretty stark, isn't it?
It really is. When white people are victims of violence, especially by non-white perpetrators, do we hear the same demands for forgiveness? Rarely, if ever. Think about 9/11. Was the media asking victims' families to forgive al-Qaeda?
Absolutely not. The focus was completely different. Justice, security, condemnation, finding those responsible.
Exactly. Or, as the Washington Post pointed out, after ISIS beheadings, there wasn't some big media campaign pushing for love and forgiveness towards the perpetrators.
That's such a clear difference. It really makes you think. The Post also made the point, nobody expects Jewish people to forgive the Nazis.
Right.
So why, as they put it, are Black Americans held to an impossibly higher standard?
It's a profound asymmetry. And some argue this narrative primarily serves, the interests of white people. It can reframe a serious act of violence, maybe rooted in systemic racism. It's just an individual dispute that forgiveness can fix.
Almost like it lets society off the hook, a sort of white atonement without real accountability.
That's one interpretation, yeah. It allows things to move on without confronting the deeper problems.
Okay, so let's recap the main thread here. This double standard seems deeply embedded in American racial dynamics.
Right. It often ends up serving what some call white comfort, making the dominant group feel emotionally okay.
Creating this public moment of Black forgiveness that might actually slow down momentum for real accountability or change.
And there's a bind. If Black families refuse forgiveness, they risk being portrayed as angry or bitter.
But if they do forgive, it's celebrated. But it can also let perpetrators, and maybe society, avoid a tougher moral reckoning. It's a cycle.
A very sobering one.
It really throws into relief how differently justice and healing seem to be approached depending on who is involved. And that brings us to a final thought, maybe something for you, our listener, to consider.
Yeah.
What does it really signify when forgiveness is demanded, or at least heavily expected, from one community but almost never from others? How does that shape how we all pursue justice, how we heal? And maybe, what does it ask of you when you encounter these stories?